All right, welcome to another episode of the Ari Lewis Show here on IsraelSportsAndNewsRadio.com. And of course, this is also being broadcast on YouTube on the Nation of Israel. If you have any questions, comments, complaints, it's a Jewish country, email us at arilewishow@hotmail.com. My guest, very special guest, we actually heard him lecture Friday night. He lectures a lot throughout Jerusalem. It's great to have on the program Mordechai Ben Avraham. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Ari. It's great.
So you've written a couple of books. Your latest book is Mind of a Black Jew, and I studied it a bit, and I love how you discuss the concept of we know maybe 1% of what's going on in the world. There's this 99% concept out there, and we're trying to tap into a lot through spirituality and other things. And I know you have a relationship with Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, as I do as well. And I want to talk a bit about Kabbalah, Zohar, these type of things, because there are some Jewish rabbis out there who are trying to say that it's not true. It's made up. It's not really Jewish. Astrology, reincarnation, these things are not true. Obviously, I disagree. I know you disagree. Talk a bit about how important it is in Judaism to have these concepts, Zohar, Kabbalah, astrology, etc.
Yeah, so to backtrack just a little bit to answer your question is the reason why I wanted to write the book is because I had a conversation probably a year ago with Dr. Henry Abramson, who's the dean of Torah College, and what he asked me and Nassim Black, who's a Jewish musician, a very popular Jewish musician, to do a webinar with him, and the webinar was titled "Black Jews and Their Place in History," and the idea behind it was that there was no historical documentation on African American religious Jews and all the academia. And so the idea behind that was to say like, oh wow, that's crazy. And then you think about, Black history in general has been kind of like this obscure experience in North America. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to write a book, a sefer, that was basically talking about the intellectual thought process behind a person who converts to Judaism. Normally, you just hear about their story, like, I grew up in this environment, and I had these experiences, and then I became Jewish. I wanted to go a step past that and really go into, like, what is the thinking process that a person who converts to Judaism, what do they see? What really connects, them to the Torah, and why would they want to change their entire life to keep 613 mitzvahs, and so that was the premise of the book. And so a lot of it, the book, as you explained, a lot of it, like, I use quantum physics as a basis, when we talk about the how quantum physics expresses that the human eye sees less than 1% of reality, and there's a whole 99% of reality that's happening around us, and how it coalesces to a Jewish idea, which is that there's a physical world and then there's a non-physical world, and they're both connected. There's Gashmias and there's Ruknias. There's Malchus and there's the upper Spheros. So to answer your question about the importance of Kabbalah, like, Kabbalah, for me, was something that allowed me, like, my parents grew up in a very, like, Christian background, and then in college they got into kind of like Sufism, which is kind of like an Islamic mysticism in a way, and we eventually migrated to the Kabbalah Center in Los Angeles with Rav Berg, and blessed memory, for me, he's a hero. And so we were there, and that really changed my perspective about how an individual could connect to God, and the potential of what an individual could achieve by expanding their mindset and their thinking process past what we're saying now is a 1% reality.
Okay, so Kabbalah helped you understand that. What's interesting is there's a lot of mainstream aspects of Judaism that will discuss Kabbalah. For example, a Mapil at night, when we forgive people, we say if they wronged us in this lifetime or another lifetime. There's another example. Do you have a particular theory of why it is not considered more mainstream? It's like considered, well, the Buddhists are into that, people in India are into that, but not Jews. But it's not true. We're supposed to be into these kind of things.
Well, I think Judaism, like, historically has had kind of like this interesting relationship with mysticism, going all the way back to Shabtai Tzvi, and who was kind of like a Jewish guy who got into Kabbalah and kind of like went way off of the derech, and I think eventually even became Muslim.
Right.
And then there was later people that came along. You had like the Ramchal, who was like teaching very similar ideas a little bit shortly after, not directly close, but in the same kind of like thinking process for the Jewish people, and he was dealt a certain way. You had the Baal Shem Tov, with which now is known as the Hasidic movement, was also. So I don't know. I think the expansionary thinking that comes along with Kabbalistic thought, is somewhat threatening for a uniformed community with certain structures and accountabilities.
Like, for example, very often Litvaks and Hasidic thought will kind of fight against each other, and because they have different value systems and different ways of thinking. But with Rav Yaakov Hillel, he is respected in the Litvak community as well. And were you able to meet him? Did you ask advice after your conversion or a bit before as well?
No, I met Yaakov Hillel after. Actually, like I would daven with Yaakov Hillel at his shul for Rosh Hashanah for the last probably 4 years up until last year.
Okay.
And yeah, he's a tremendous person. I've met him many times, and he's given me brachas and these types of things. But I've listened to many of his lectures, and he's, I'm just speaking from my own personal experience. He's a true Talmid Chacham.
Oh, yeah.
He's very, and from a classical sense.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, he doesn't necessarily like to do the Kabbalah, heebie-jeebie type of thing. He knows Shas and Talmud Chacham, etc., but he also has an interesting background. He boxed a bit. Baal Tshuva, he grew up in India. And so it'd be interesting the connections of Baal Tshuva where they achieve very high spiritual levels when they have a very interesting background, like yourself. You've been in work in movies and politics, etc. Do you notice a similar kind of world where I did really well in this world, I can do really well in this world? Do you see a connection at all?
I think like the greatest the greatest set of Torah experiences that we've learned about in the Jewish world have come from unique life experiences from people. Like, the Torah itself is, like everyone has a unique Torah that they can bring to the table. Like everyone has a unique set of experiences, and you apply those experiences to the text of the Torah and the energy of the Torah, and how you receive it is going to be much different than your neighbor. I think that's one of the ideas of Har Sinai, that every Jew was standing on Mount Sinai, and they stood in different places, and it was a whole mountain, and so every Jew saw, the revelation on Har Sinai from a different angle. And so from that perspective, it's like, every Jew has a unique take on the Torah, and the sages say there's 70 faces to the Torah, and the Torah that a man who's poor learns is much different than a man who's rich, so it's all reflective of our unique experiences in life.
Okay, this is the Ari Lewis Show here on IsraelSportsNewsRadio.com, and also, again, this is on the YouTube channel as well, Nation of Israel. So, Mordechai, I wanted to ask you, because we keep it real on this show, there's a lot of shows in Israel that don't discuss all the problems in this country, but we're going to discuss it to try to solve some of these problems. I want to know, I know your conversion took place before you got to Israel, but you can be honest, did you receive any type of discrimination from Israel government or any type of area that was not fair because you converted? Because a lot of converts in this country really suffer. I don't like it, and I want to fix it. But if you can be honest,
my rabbi, Rabbi Moshe Futa, is very connected here in Israel. He's Israeli. His family is a long dynasty of Rabbanim here in Israel. So he's been definitely advocating for me, and I don't know. Like, I'm in from the Sephardic side, so maybe it's a little bit less stringent. I don't know, but so far so good.
Your conversion is Sephardic conversion.
It's a conversion, but my rabbi, all conversions are the same, but my rabbi is Sephardic.
So do you take on Sephardic customs?
Yeah, minhagim, yeah.
Okay, so you can eat rice during Pesach and that kind of stuff.
Definitely, yeah.
Awesome.
I look forward to it.
I think you made a good decision there. So also, when you were making decisions to convert back in the United States, were there people that were not supportive, or overall did you feel a lot of support? When you convert, you kind of, one of the things is like I was involved in the Kabbalah Center, for a long time, and, I realized that, I had a tremendous desire to want to keep the Torah. I had that tremendous desire, so I left, and I met different rabbis in Los Angeles, and I ended up with my rabbi, Rabbi Hufuta, and it took me like a couple years, to actually convert. But, when you convert, it's like I didn't really, you kind of look at it from the standpoint of like you have a life, and then you want to keep the Torah. And you don't realize that like through that process, you literally transform your entire nature of who you are.
and what you're about, and so that was something that like no one could really explain to you. You had to go through it. And so, you know, when I was going through it, I mean, there was definitely different experiences of opposition, and, you know, I converted in the place I grew up. So, you know, when people see you doing something different or unique or great, you know, everyone has an opinion and these types of things. And so there was some levels of opposition, mostly from people that like I knew, you know,
right, of course, right.
Not from any like authoritative structures. But I think it's, you know, anytime you do anything great in life, you know, Hashem has to create a challenge in order for you to know that the reason why you're successful is because of Hashem and not your own willpower and strength.
There's also saying a prophet is not accepted in his home. So I could see, because I had this as well, and maybe Svi as well, where I come to Israel, and some of my Jewish friends said, why are you doing that? But my non-Jewish friends, even in high school, said, hey, congratulations on doing that. So it's interesting that you bring that up. Some of the people you knew were, I don't know if you should convert or not. I want to ask you also the concept when you're studying for your conversion, any times you thought, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. It's really hard. I'm changing my life, a whole other lifestyle, 613 mitzvot. You ever thought maybe throw it in the towel, or it didn't happen?
You know, the thing about it, I mean, I wish I had that ability to think in that way, but it was so compelling to my nature that like it wasn't like I was determined mentally. It was just who I was. It was like I mean, it's beyond logic. I mean, trust me. Like I had a very much easier life before I was Jewish. You know, I was working in the entertainment business. I was an executive. I was very productive. You know, successful. But it was just like the more I learned, the more I had less free will about that decision. And it was just I get deeper and deeper and deeper, and you know, you just when you're going through the conversion process, because you don't know when you're going to actually go into the mikveh and do brit milah, all these types of things, and you think to yourself like, man, like I remember when I was going through my conversion process, one of the things I was like thinking about, like, what if something happened to me and I passed away and I was buried in a non-Jewish cemetery, you know, like these types of things, like because that's who I was even then, you know. And you know, the thing is, you know, one of the things about, like, you know, when I was at the Kabbalah Center, you know, when I met the Rav Burke who passed away, you know, I'll say, like, it wasn't so much about, like, you know, Kabbalistic knowledge and the Arizal and even, or say, basic halacha or these types of things. What he really did for me was that he really showed me the pain and the greatness of the world that I lived in. And he showed me that the greatest way to participate in this world is by keeping the Torah. And once I saw that world, you know, I came from an environment that was, you know, what would be considered like upper middle class and very, you know, materialistic, I guess. And that reality was just something that was so compelling to me that really nothing else mattered other than keeping the Torah.
And you ever, speaking of materialism, you have a great story where when you were younger, your father bought you a very nice car and said, you know what, a lot of people work a really long time to get a car like this, and I want to give it to you now when you're young to show you it's not such a big deal. Can you elaborate on that story? I really like that story.
Yeah. So my dad, you know, is a tremendous person. Hopefully he sees the interview. He was really into Mercedes. I don't know if he's so much is into it now, but he was like really into the point we had books on the new models in the house.
Oh, wow.
And he was really into it. And he was really into like the way the automobile was
structured.
It was structured, and the performance and the attention to detail, and these types of things.
Driven car.
Yeah. And so so that's pretty much the predominant cars we had growing up. And so I think the first car I had was like it was a 500 like SEC, which was like a coupe.
Pretty good car.
Yeah, it was a pretty good car. I don't think it was a V12 engine, but it was like a high V9 type of a thing, V8, high V8 type of a thing. Okay. And that was in high school.
Wow.
Yeah, but he told me, like, he just said, like, you know, I want you to, you know, when you have this car, I want you to have it, experience it, and so you don't spend the rest of your life trying to obtain these things. And I think maybe in an indirect, subconscious way, that was a foundational point for me to explore spirituality past that, because it's like, you know, when you grow up in the suburbs, it's like it's a different reality. I mean, you can see like why a lot of people are depressed, because it's like you're there, you know, you have with the American dream, and then you're like, then what?
Right.
And so that was kind of like growing up into that, and I think that's what really made me cling to the Torah, because it was the only. I mean, my family, my mom's a professor, my younger sister's a professor, and my grandmother was an academic, and so it was all. I mean, our family's very educated, and they didn't really necessarily have solutions for life per se. And so when the Torah came, it has a structure to it, and it had an order, and it had this connections to a world beyond the five senses, and I was just kind of like, this is great.
But to make it clear, you're not anti-materialism. You make that clear in your book.
Yeah, no. I mean, the enemy's not materialism. I mean, the Torah says like you should experience pleasure. Right. I mean, luxury is a good thing, you know, especially when you're using it as a tool to do, you know, the Ratzon of Hashem more, when you're able to give more and share more, and you have more shalom bayis inside of your home, and, you know, and comfort is important. I mean, you don't want to be stressed out, you know, in life. You should be relaxed. You could contemplate God. You could contemplate God's ways. So I'm definitely an advocate of luxury, you know, but from the standpoint as a tool to heighten, or going on a vacation as a tool to heighten your ability to experience God.
All right, again, this is the Ari Lewis Show here on IsraelSportsNewsRadio.com, also broadcast on YouTube, Nation of Israel YouTube page. I wanted to ask you, make this also a great analogy in your book regarding the concept that just as Shabbat is going to come, we have time to prepare for Shabbat. Once Shabbat hits, that's it. Can't prepare for it anymore. Same thing with the afterlife, Olam Haba, etc. So if you could expound on that, I love that connection between Shabbat and the next world.
Yeah. You know, the thing is, it's like, you know, we should, you know, I think everyone should contemplate their individual greatness. You know, and what is that unique contribution we're supposed to make in this lifetime, and what tools do we need to get to that place? And I believe the Torah is one of the major foundational tools to get to the thinking process, and also have the strength and the clarity to understand what our purpose is. And so while we're in this life, we have this chance to literally build our own base of Mikdash in the next world, you know, our own place of connection to God. And every second we have is so important, you know, like even this interview we're doing, it's like we're talking about Torah, where hopefully people see it and they get chizuk, these things. This is part of us building a brick in our base of Mikdash in this next world, and even in this world. And it's like that, the mashal, the metaphor for that in this life is Shabbos, you know, we prepare, and then but when Shabbos hits, there's no more preparing, and whatever you made, whatever food you made, however your house is prepared, that's what you're going to deal with for this time period. But the next world is for eternity. And so that's the idea is, it's like we all are here in this world, and we're destined for greatness, and Hashem wants us to be great, and Hashem wants us to be successful. And there is an opposition, there is a Satan that wants to convince us, no, that's not the case, and you're not great, and you're not supposed to do things. But if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have something to break against to show our belief and our love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world.
Right, because there's a concept that on the sixth day, that's when Hashem created the Yetzer Hara, and Rashi said that's why Hashem said that was a great day, because now we have a test.
Yeah.
Without a test, it's not as good. You know, speaking of greatness, I don't know if you remember this or not, but we were at a dinner at Rav Maklis probably about 6 months ago, also a great man, and you just got engaged that week. And I said, you know, I'm happy both are getting engaged because it's in the midst of COVID and all these things are going on, world's in turmoil. You had a great line. You said some of the rabbis have done their best work when they're on the run, stress, turmoil. They were able to be their best. So if you could just expound about that, I really like that you said that to me.
Yeah, no, it's a great idea. It's like I don't know, like I get a lot of strength from the Ramchal and his story. Like he was just like a controversial thinker, and he really pushed the envelope, and people were like banning this guy from this place and that place, and
burning his books,
and he's running, and he was just still writing, you know. He was still writing, he was still, you know, doing big. Even you have Rabbi Aaron Cutler from BMG. When you hear about his life in Europe, I mean, he had to like dodge all types of people. There was like crazy pogroms. He had to deal with the mafia and all these different things. And even when he came to the United States, there was huge opposition to have like a full Torah institutions. You know, people wanted to have secular studies. He was against these things. So I mean, there's so many great gedolim that With just, in general in life. I mean, it's like, who's ever created a great business, where everything was easy?
Right.
You know what I mean?
I'm going to quote Ari Follow-Sham. He said, if life is easy, you're not doing it right. It's like, it's true. You see this time and time again. All these successful people, that they had these murky parts in their biographies. Another thing, we're talking a bit about the, with Shabbos and Olam Haba, etc., about and greatness. And one of the things you're great at is public speaking. I need to know, though, if you can be honest. I know this is being watched by a lot of people, but do you ever get nervous when you public speak?
Maybe a little bit.
Because it's number one fear in the world is public speaking.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I feel like, the key to public speaking, I would say, is, loving the people that you're talking to.
Okay.
And I think the more you arouse that love for the people you're speaking to, the easier it makes it. If I'm just saying something that I think is important and I want to be recognized, I could see like the judgments that go on in your head. But if you see, like, if say you're a parent and you see your child, running in the middle of the street and they're in danger, I think it's very difficult to be worried about yourself.
Huh.
And so, like, I feel like some of the ideas and giving inspiration, these types of things, it's like, people need it. I mean, you don't, like you said, Rabbi Maklis, it's like, he does so much for the Jewish people. There's so many people that, there's yeshiva guys that come there from A-list families and seminary people, women from A-list families, and you have people who are homeless. You have people who are there.
That'd be the only meal. If it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have a meal. Some of those people.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's credible.
And so it's like, when you see those types of things happening in Kol Israel, like, it's, it's very humble. And we're surrounded by so many great people too. It's so many people, especially here in Jerusalem. Obviously all over Israel, but specifically Jerusalem, that's where I spent mostly all my time. It's just, there's just so many people who just have given their lives. Like, I was by Or Sameach for years, and so many rabbis there are not making very much money and are just dedicating their lives to helping people do tshuva and to come back to Judaism. And so me going out there and, sharing words of inspiration compared to the people I've been exposed to is like minuscule to, I don't want to say nothing because everything is valuable, but the people I've been exposed to are, their level of giving is just beyond imagination. So for me, giving up and sharing a few words for an hour or less or whatever, I put it in proportion to what I've been exposed to.
So, by the way, just to clarify, Rob Maklis is a man who lives in Malo Dafna, has, for I think over 30 years, has had over hundreds of people over for a place on Shabbat. And I was mentioning that...
Not just Shabbat, all the holidays, everything.
Yes. And when I say some people wouldn't have had a meal for that Shabbat if it wasn't for him, that's pretty accurate. Just for a variety of reasons. I'd like to see Israel have more soup kitchens out there. There's still a lot, and it does very well, especially compared to other countries. But, Rob Maklis is a mainstay for that mitzvah. Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show here on IsraelSportsNewsRadio.com. Also broadcasted on Nation of Israel on YouTube as well. I've heard you in a couple of interviews talk about the concept of values in the black community as compared with kind of this idea that you said it was better in the 60s and 50s? Can you, because a lot of people would be kind of surprised by that.
Yeah, it's a controversial idea.
Yeah.
So, the thing is, it's like, it's an interesting idea. So you see like, when they talk about like when African Americans were breaking out of segregation, bringing to Jim Crow, and they were going to, had young black girls that were like going to schools, and there was like all this opposition from their white neighbors, like, oh, we don't want integration, these types of things. And you think about it, like now today in like 2021, like public school system is basically a pipeline in the inner city for the prisons. But 40 years ago, we were fighting to get into those schools. And during those times, when they were fighting to get into schools, you had a community that was intellectually, sharp enough and aware enough that they were able to decipher the Constitution and wanted to, go against laws and create innovative ways of protesting and these types of things. And so what happened? You had the whole South, when we had times of segregation, you had, black-owned restaurants, black-owned hotels. You had, the whole civil rights movement was funded by African-American entrepreneurs. You know what I mean? The sit-ins, they're preaching the whole thing. And so, there's this idea that like integration was a benefit, and in reality, it really wasn't, for African Americans, and even for the Jewish people in general. Like integration is not, when Jews were in shtetls and they were separated, or they were in places in the Middle East where the Muslims held them accountable to be Jewish, there wasn't assimilation during those times. Sure. Judaism was very strong, and so I think there's an idea of, in a fair society, I think integration is a great thing. But in a society that is not fair, and Western society has not been a fair society to minorities in general, integration is almost like a setup for failure. So black people were much more economically successful. They were homeowners. They had two-parent households. They had their own college institutions. They had HBCs. And today, you have abortions at an all-time high. You have drugs that are rampant. You have the highest unemployment rate with African-American youth in the entire country. The African-American youth are the highest unemployed. And it's very tragic.
My theory, because you mentioned the pipeline into the prison system, the way the schools are set up, is that prisons are very often privately owned.
Yeah.
And it turns out to be a business. Mm-hmm. And it's a huge percentage. Actually, a lot of people will be surprised at this, but the biggest percentage of a country's prison, being a prison, is in the United States. It's not in any country in the world. In fact, America makes approximately 25% of all prisoners in the world are in America. Is that the issue, that it's a business, so they want to encourage people to go to prison?
The reality is, it's like whether you look at United States or Honduras, when you look at these places where there's high murder in impoverished areas, it's the drug business. Wherever you see drug culture in the world, you're going to see a tremendous amount of murders, and you're going to see a lot of criminal behavior, criminal culture, and the backdrop of that is jail and prison. And if those things are synonymous, you look at television today, African American programming is centered around, drug dealers, and glorifying violence, and glorifying the belittling of women and family. This is the images that are being seen, which are perpetuated by corporations. So you have, and there's even tie-ins to some of these media conglomerates in privately owned prisons. They're all owned under the same umbrella. And so you have that, and you have a lot of corruption in the criminal justice system, and no one's a victim. But I believe that without the Torah, and the reason why the Jewish people have been able to persevere under similar attacks, the Jewish people have been able to persevere through similar attacks, is because of the Torah. Is because there's been a mechanism to critically think what's going on around you. There's been a way to separate yourself from that. The Jews, more religious the Jews are, the less they want to integrate into the secular world. I lived in Meir Sharim for almost 4.5 years. And I learned a lot of things from Meir Sharim. I learned a lot about spiritual resistance and being able to at least attempt to block, secular ideas and secular information that wants to take people's minds and ultimately make them slaves of a false set of belief systems.
It's interesting to say images, because it's very common in a Jewish home to see pictures of rabbis, learned people, educated people, a value of intelligence. And in some aspects of American culture, people are putting up pictures of movie stars, and TV stars, or singers, or whatever. They're putting out the wrong ideas to their kids, and what do you expect is going to happen, right?
Well, the thing even with that is like, sometimes you hear people who are very religious, they'll be like, or people bought tshuva. They'll be like, I made tshuva because the world is fake. The world out there is fake. And you're like, what do you mean the world's fake? The world's very real, And I think one of the biggest, I don't know if the word is misnomers, but one of the biggest misconceptions about reality is that there's a big difference between pleasure and happiness.
Okay.
Right? There's a lot of things that are pleasurable. Like doing drugs is pleasurable, having relationships with women is pleasurable, all these different things are pleasurable. Buying clothes is pleasurable. Buying nice cars is pleasurable. But happiness is a totally different space. Okay. Sometimes they do interchange, and sometimes happiness comes through pain. It comes through difficulty. And I think that the world that we live in creates this picture that pleasure is the path to happiness. In that story, that narrative being repeated over and over again has done great things for the private sector in terms of consumerism, in these types of ideas, but the Torah tells us very different. The Torah tells us that sometimes the path to happiness or sustainability of happiness comes through the Torah. It comes through the path of the Torah. And that's where this whole idea of 1% reality and 99% reality comes together, because you can't see everything. You only can see only one part of, reality. We talk about things like, I got married or these different, with Sephora, but it's like, it took us time to get to know each other. You know what I mean? Because there's a physical part of her that's an amazing person, a great personality, and very engaging. But then there's a whole 99% of her that, I'm going to be living with for the rest of my life, God willing. You know what I mean? And so when you get to know that part of a person, you could have a clear idea. And that's why the Torah tries to tell us to be Shoma Negia and these different ideas to at least get some level of clarity on that external part of that person and not just be blinded by the physical part of it. And so I think that's the idea that we have to get past in reality, is to really ask ourselves, like, what is really going to bring me to true and lasting happiness and peace? And it's not consumerism, and it's not materialism, and those are the biggest distractions on many levels in terms of us achieving that knowledge of who am I really, what is my purpose, and how can I share it with the world at the capacity that God wants me to.
You talk about the 99% concept. I have this theory, not just myself, but other people out there, that science and the Torah at some point are going to be biyachad, they'll be together. Science is going to prove things to the Torah. And I'm thinking that a lot of these psychologists, scientists will say the 99% is the subconscious, but we would call it something different. But do you see the correlation that where they're talking about the subconscious, Freud, and all these people, we're talking about is a spiritual matter?
Yeah, I mean, like even if you look at a couple Parshiot ago, we had this whole issue with the spies going into Eretz Israel. So on one level, you could look at it like, okay, there was these spies going into Eretz Israel, but then there's another way of looking at it and saying like, hey, you know what? This whole parsha is teaching us about rational and irrational fears. Right? Because the whole concept was thinking about things that could, would, and may happen that weren't not necessarily true. Some of them were, some of them weren't. And because of that, they didn't enter this higher state of consciousness, which we know is Israel. Like the Kabbalah says, like Mitzrayim, Egypt is a state of consciousness, which is a narrow way of thinking. And you have Israel, which is more of an expanded, holistic way of perceiving reality. So the idea is to leave Egypt and to enter the land of Israel. On a physical level, yes, but it's also a mental, intellectual, spiritual level of perceiving reality. So the Israelites entering this land of expanded consciousness, what stopped them were things that didn't really exist. And even to the point, you could say that the spies were divided from 10 to 2. Right? And so you could say like you had the 10 people saying, no, we're terrified. That could be part of the brain. Part of the brain. And you have another aspect of the brain, which may be a minority, that says, no, you can do it. And that's the battle. That's the battle. To the point the Torah says that Caleb, he spoke out loud, right? He spoke louder than the rest. He got everyone's attention. God willing, we have that when it's our time to enter into a greater reality, that part of our brain that is connected to Hashem, that is looking for truth, that is going to fight against the fear. Because Hashem said the land was good. So why don't we believe? Tomorrow we're all going to wake up. Hashem says that every single person is supposed to be successful. Every single person is supposed to achieve. So why don't we believe that? Why do we self-sabotage ourselves? Why do we take ourselves away from that? Because there's a part of our brain that's saying, with those 10 spies, we're saying, and it's louder than the other part of ourselves that does believe in this ability. So the Torah, the point that I'm saying is that the Torah is psychology. The Torah is science. Everything that the scientists are saying is maybe an aspect of our Torah. And there's 4 dimensions to our Torah, right? There's the Peshat, there's Rimes, there's Drash, and there's Sod. I mean, there's a lot of to work with just one parsha, one pasuk. So the point is saying everything that science will say, the whole reality is a Torah. Everything that you see is a Torah. We're able to understand the sun setting and the significance right now because of the Torah. We're able to understand what Jerusalem is because of the Torah. The whole world understands what Jerusalem is because of the Torah and its significance. So the whole world is just an expression of the Torah. The physical reality that we're able to see is just an expression of the physical Torah. And so when we talk about science or any other type of, intellectual experience that we may have throughout the ages, it's just a microcosm of what's inside of this, not just manuscript, but the energy that emanates from Hashem that is expressed through this manuscript called the Torah.
I want to recall something that you said earlier regarding public speaking about loving the audience, because there's a concept with Birkat Kohanim that with the Kohen Duchen, that if they don't love everyone in the room, they're not actually supposed to go up there and do it. I want to know if that idea is somehow permeated, and that's where you got this concept that you need to love everyone in the audience. And in general, there's certain things you take with Jewish ritual service, and you're like, yeah, I want to apply that to my public speaking skills.
There's a rabbi in Los Angeles named Rabbi Jadidi. And I used to go to his lectures a lot in Los Angeles, and he used to speak a lot about not just performing the mitzvah, but becoming the mitzvah.
Okay.
In meaning that, like, he would use example, like, there's a mitzvah in shul to not have idle chatter. Right. Not to have idle chatter.
Yeah.
You go in Meir Sharim, you go to Stiblock, you can't talk, period. Right. Forget about idle chatter. And so he would say, like, that mitzvah of not speaking idle chatter, that mitzvah should also carry on into your everyday life. You shouldn't have idle chatter in your life, period, even outside of the Beit Knesset. And so what you're saying about the Kohanim and having, love for everybody before they come up and give brakot, is this idea of just saying that that's a mitzvah we should have in life in general. Like, you should really work. I mean, they said, like, there's the famous story, there's a convert, I go to Hillel and Shammai, and they asked him to tell me the Torah on 1 foot, whatever. Right. And the response is that, love thy neighbor as thyself. Right? I think Hillel says this.
Right.
And the idea behind that is to say that the entire Torah itself is supposed to get us to a point where we love our neighbor as ourselves. That all the 613 mitzvahs are there to change the condition of our heart, to change our intellectual outlook, for us to be able to love thy neighbor as we love ourselves.
And touch upon that, there was actually a video I saw a few months ago where Roy Innes, who I think is actually one of the top civil rights activists in the last 50 years, it's a shame he's not as famous as he should be, he meets with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and they're talking about this concept. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe, they're both saying, the Roy Innes is saying, we have a similar background, both have suffered from persecution and prejudice, etc. And the key is about loving each other. And he was talking about how, kind of mentioned, the media wanted to divide up both these groups, and they got along so well. And I think that maybe is that the key to ending anti-Semitism, is that there would be more love between Jews and non-Jews.
Yeah, I mean, there's I think it's Rabbi Simcha Wasserman.
Right. Yes.
And he writes about this idea of, the fact that there is anti-Semitism in the world, which is like disproportionate hatred than any other group historically on planet Earth. That should be an insight to us that there's something unique about the Jewish people. And the uniqueness of the Jewish people goes beyond nature. It goes beyond reality. And the idea is to say that, when you think about anti-Semitism, it's like, why does God create anti-Semitism? Why do we need to have that experience? Because this is God created. Even though it's enacted through people of evil intent and they're going to be judged for that, but still the idea, like everything that exists in reality, is from God. So it's like, why do we have to have anti-Semitism? What is it there to do? What does it do for the Jew? And you could almost say that it reminds us that we're Jewish. It reminds us that we're Jewish. And I think the ending of anti-Semitism is the more we take on the mission of the Jewish people, which is uplifting the world, that space for hatred that comes from the force that you said was created on the seventh day, or sixth day, with the Satan.
Yeah, right.
Was that when that force is diminished or weakened, we lift up all the nations to have this clarity, and they will see the Jewish people as a benefit to them. They'll see the mission, the tefillah, the mitzvot, the tzedakah, the wisdom of the Jewish people as being a benefit. Like Simona Sadek says, the world stands on three things: the whole galaxy, all the universes, all the galaxies, everything you ever see through a Hubble telescope stands on three things, which is tefillah, limud Torah, learning Torah, and hesed, kindness. And we're the only nation that has that prescribed to them as a way of living. We have to do those things. There's Muslims that pray and do these things. I don't really know, like, if a dafka says they have to do it, they're going to be punished. I don't know. Okay. Or the same thing with Christians. I don't know if they say these people do it, but they learn that from us. They learn that from the Jewish people, praying, learning their scriptures, giving tzedakah, doing acts of kindness. This all came from us because we were commanded to do it. And so I believe the ending of anti-Semitism and the bringing of the Mashiach is this idea of us, one, within ourselves having peace, and really seeing that peace as being something as a protection shield as we spread it around the world.
Because sometimes I think that anti-Semites are saying things, even though in a harsh tone, as you mentioned, kind of some truth. And I'll give you an example. There's a video somewhere out there you could see on YouTube where Louis Farrakhan is talking about the evils of Hollywood, on and on and on, right? And I was watching the video. The first 10 minutes I said, hey, okay, he's got a point, okay. And then he said, and you Jews should know better because it's in your Torah. And it just kind of freaked me out. I was like, okay, an evil man doesn't like Jews, but he had a point that sometimes you get lessons from people that hate you, ironically. Sounds weird, but it is true, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's a touchy, it's a sensitive area, when you talk about people with their own political agendas,
yes,
when they say things, but the world is there to teach us how to be better Jews in terms of the good things and also the bad things. And I would say that the non-Jewish world, they need to be able to make a clear separation between Jews that follow the Torah and Jews that don't.
Right.
Because those are two different people. And even though they have similar heritage, and the Jew who doesn't keep the Torah can eventually keep the Torah and be an outstanding person, but a Jew without the Torah is not reflective of Moshe, is not reflective of Abraham, is not reflective of Yitzhak or Yaakov or any of the things you read in the Torah. And that's why we have so many efforts in the Jewish world to bring those people closer to the Torah. And also you have to have compassion why there are Jews that don't keep the Torah. A lot of it is because of the non-Jewish world holding them hostage.
Right.
Basically putting guns to their heads and saying, if you keep the Torah, we're going to kill you. If you perform these traditions, we're going to murder you. We're going to, destroy your homes. We're going to do terrible things. So, I mean, there's a catch-22. It's like they could be upset with the Jew that doesn't keep the Torah, but there's a whole process of why a Jew doesn't keep the Torah. It's not necessarily his free will. Every Jew, given the right environment, would keep the Torah. Every single Jew. The Jew that doesn't keep the Torah is because they're experiencing some type of trauma that mostly has to do with the non-Jewish world, and the reason that makes them feel that they don't want to keep the Torah, whether they're fearful or they have some type of angst against it or whatever, and then that leads to all these other deviant behaviors that are an embarrassment for us Jews that keep the Torah.
Right, because you mentioned George Soros in your book. Obviously, he's not representing Torah values, but you look deeper in his biography, and he was in the Shoah, and obviously he's going to have trauma from that and the pressure of the non-Jews. So
exactly.
You kind of understand where he's come from, even though, George, if you're watching this, I mean, repent, stop doing what you're doing, the bad stuff, I mean. I know we've talked about a lot of heavy stuff. Let's end this episode with something a little lighter. We know the Nets lost in the playoffs. I think that's a good thing. But do you, I think the Nets next season, I think they're going to win it all. Do you have a prediction, like to say this year or next year, about the NBA championship? Because my Suns are still in it. Western Conference Finals, baby.
Whatever team Amari Stoudemire is coaching on is going to win a championship next year.
All right.
So that's what we're holding by.
So the Brooklyn Nets managers watch this, keep Amari, and Amari and Steve are a great team. They were great in Phoenix. That was their best years, in my opinion. And then keep them as coach staff, and we'll see. Maybe that's when the time next year. James Harden with Arizona State, another connection. Thank God actually that the Nets and Suns did not play this year in the finals. I would have been a little bit conflicted of who to root for, because Amari was on Israel Sports Radio summer 2010 actually, so he helped us out. So that would have been kind of tough. All right, the book is Mind of a Black Jew. Where can they pick up the book?
So we're going to release it first as an NFT.
Okay.
First, and we're going to release 2,000 copies as an NFT, and it's not just the book itself. We have like amazing pictures of so many African American religious Jews living in Israel, like Kever Siddiqim at weddings. We have Mari Stoudemire in pictures. We have Nassim Black. We got all types of amazing characters. Zakaria, L'chaim OG. We have like really amazing guys and so many yeshiva bakram, and it's really a historical document that has never existed ever in human history. And so we're going to release it as an NFT, and we have a publishing deal right now with Corin Publishing.
Okay. Corin.
And so they're going to release it probably later this year at some point. It's a lot of editing and things like that, but Corin is totally innovative. They got it from day one, so we're family. But I'm going to release it as an NFT, which is separate from them. The NFT is.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to release it as an NFT, which is separate, and we're going to see how that goes. And I think we're going to have great success. So we're going to release that in the next week or so. And so everyone should look out for Mind of the Black Jew NFT. And it has great photos and all. It's going to have a lot of other interesting tie-ins, but we're going to be selling that 2,000 of those. And later this year, it should be everywhere through Corin, everywhere from Amazon to every Jewish bookstore on planet Earth.
Could they find you on Instagram? Is that also a good way to be in touch with you?
Yeah, they could find me. I mean, Facebook.
Facebook.
You can find Mordechai Ben Avraham. You can find me there, or you could Google Mordechai Ben Avraham. There's like articles and all those types of stuff. But the key thing is just is about love and unity with all the nations, and but seeing it through a Talmudic lens.
Well said. All right, my guest this evening has been Mordechai Ben Avraham. This has been the Ari Lewis Show here on IsraelSportsNewsRadio.com. Also on YouTube, of course. You can watch this as well and tell your friends. And if you don't have any friends, tell your enemies. Let's get it more hits. Let's get more people to watch it. All right, God bless. Good night. Thank you for being on the program. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.